Greetings. It is a joy to be with you in this virtual space. Our church community welcomes you, whether you are new or a longtime member. We especially want to welcome those who are here for the very first time. If you would like to learn more about our community and its online offerings, please go to nsuc.org and sign up for our newsletter. There has never been a better time to get involved or become a member of the North Shore Unitarian Church. We would love to get you connected, and we welcome you today. Let us now begin our worship with music.
I bring us together this morning with some words from Carl G. Seberg. Let there be joy in our coming together this morning. Let there be truth heard in the words we speak and the songs we sing. Let there be help and healing for our disharmony and despair. Let there be silence for the voice within us and beyond us. Let there be joy in our coming together.
This flame affirms the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.
The 4 candles on the wreath count down through the seasons of winter's dark, leading into the light. Advent is a time of waiting, of cultivating patience. This season asks us to hold faith that all that we are becoming is still awakening under the surface of our lives. On the second Sunday of Advent, we light the candle of peace with the words of Pema Chodron, a Buddhist nun. If we want there to be peace in the world, we have to be brave enough to soften what is rigid in our hearts, to find that soft spot and stay with it. We have to have that kind of courage and take that kind of responsibility. That's the true practice of peace. May this time of waiting inspire our courage. May we find the soft spot in the pressures of this season and stay with it as we discern our way forward. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be at ease and discover the true practice of peace within us, so that there might be peace in the world.
Good morning. This is a story I'm calling Mormor's Arsopa, and it's inspired by the story Thank You, Omu by Oge Mora. The pot of Arsopa had been bubbling on Mormor's little stovetop for hours. It was December 13th, St. Lucia's Day, the day when she and Henrik would always enjoy this traditional Swedish soup. It had been a hard year for Mormor. Henrik had passed away nearly 11 months ago, and nothing had been quite the same since. With the days now growing darker and colder, she knew that it was going to be a long winter. With only a few minutes remaining before the Arsopa would be ready, Mormor decided to light a few candles and straighten the photo of Henrik and her on the mantel. She was about to light the last candle when she heard a knock at her front door. It was Carl, the little neighbor boy. He was as skinny as a rail and always grateful for the lingonberries Mormor would share with him in the summertime. "Mormor," he said, "I was playing outside when I just happened to smell the most amazing scent coming from your cottage. Could I please try some of your soup?" "Well, I guess I can share a little with you," she said. So with that, Mormor filled up a bowl for the boy. When he was done, he proclaimed that this was the best soup he had ever had, said thank you, and left. Mormor smiled and decided that it was time for her own bowl. Mormor had just pulled the bowl out of the cupboard when there was another knock on the door. It was the mail carrier. "I'm sorry to bother you at dinner time, ma'am. I was doing my rounds when I encountered the most delicious scent coming from your home. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, I'd love to try some of your Arsopa. I haven't had it in years." "Sure," she replied. She was grateful for his friendship, and it was pretty cold outside. And with that, she prepared a bowl for the mail carrier. On and on this went. Just as she would turn towards the stove, there would be another knock on the front door. Her shut-in neighbor, the police officer, and her cousin all stopped by, all claiming to have smelled her soup, all seeking a sample, which she happily then provided. By the time she had said goodbye to the last guest, Mormor was, like the candle she had lit hours before, a mere nub. She was, of course, very hungry too. Eager to finally try her soup, Mormor walked over to the stove. To her horror, the pot of Arsopa was empty. She had given away all of her soup. Feeling utterly defeated, Mormor sat down and began to cry. How could she have been so absent-minded? This was the worst St. Lucia Day ever. That's when there was a knock on the door. Another visitor? Really? She got up, opened the door, and started to say, "I'm so sorry, I'd love to share my soup, but we're here to give," interrupted the boy. "We're here to give." And with that, the mailman had out a tray of hot St. Lucia buns from the bakery down the street, and the shut-in neighbor pulled out a bowl of lutefisk. Everyone who had enjoyed some of Mormor's Arsopa had something to add to Mormor's table as a way to repay her kindness. Together they talked and enjoyed their feast. During the meal, Mormor happened to notice the words that wrapped around the picture of her and Henrik on the mantel. "Dialad Gladia, Dubo Gladia, Dialad Sorye, Halv Sorye." Shared joy is a double joy. Shared sorrow is half a sorrow. Maybe it wouldn't be such a tough winter after all.
North Shore Unitarian Church is a community that is grounded in love, guided by reason, committed to spiritual growth, and striving for justice. We accomplish this mission through the generous donations of our members and friends. And so we invite you to text your donation now. Please note that in order to give, you must include NSUC and the amount. beloved companions. Let us find one another in the space of prayer and meditation as we connect to the very spirit of life itself, the holy that binds us to each other and to the world around us. Over the past few months, we have all become acutely aware of what the effects of a deadly virus can be on our global community. This week, as we honor World AIDS Day, we are reminded of another deadly virus that continues to attack bodies all across our planet. In 2019, there were 38 million people living with HIV and 700,000 people who died of AIDS-related illnesses. The combined effects of COVID and HIV in 2020 are expected to be devastating. Like the novel coronavirus, HIV also has had a more significant impact on poor communities, communities of color, women and girls, and the global South in general. And also, like the coronavirus, HIV and AIDS have been politicized. Those infected with and living with HIV continue to face stigma and abuse, and misinformation about transmission and treatment is still prevalent. So together we pray. Spirit, let us continue to advocate for access to affordable health care, both for prevention and for treatment of HIV. May we advocate for and contribute to the resources needed for programs of education about the transmission and programs of support for those living with HIV. Let us support global organizations such as UNAIDS, as well as local providers like Lake County Community Health Center, who do the frontline work in the effort to stamp out HIV once and for all. Sacred love, divine love, let us examine our own hearts. Let us eradicate any ill will that we have against the gay and trans communities, against the poor, against sex workers, against IV drug users, and other groups that are at higher risk for contracting HIV. Let us speak up in defense of our shared humanity. May we remember our connection to the sacred web of all life. May we remember that no one is outside the circle of care and concern. May it be so, and blessed be.
Our reading today is called Joy by Terry Payhawk. I have been wondering what the morning glories know. Is it envy that compels these vines to strangle other flowers arising in their path? Or perhaps self-preservation, to climb these walls, forsaking humbler beings, winding greedy stems around the trellis in their hungry pursuit of light. Still, every morning, basking in their spiral shadows, I want to believe it is something more. This fevered yearning to open purple flowers, yield bold-throated glorias to the sun, and in the blaze of afternoon, curl petals softly into shyness. And every morning, I plead with the dew-moist buds to know their secret joy, to open and close without holding, to surrender all to light, to sing, I am completely yours, over and over again.
Sometime in his mid-40s, Philip Lopate penned a famous essay in which he condemned, of all things, joy. He catalogs the many reasons to be skeptical of joy and its adjacent feelings. Here is one of his quotes. To know rapture is to have one's whole life poisoned. A tincture of rapture is like a red bandana in the laundry that runs and turns the whole whitewash pink. We should just as soon stay away from any future ecstatic experiences that spoil everyday living by comparison. In other words, when we find joys that are too great, that are too overwhelming, we end up living the rest of our lives in their shadow, discovering that nothing quite measures up. Another of his targets is the pursuit of youthful zest, even for people who should have outgrown it. He says this, "The truth is that most wisdom is embittering. The task of the wise person cannot be to pretend with false naivety that every moment is new and unprecedented, but to bear the burden of bitterness that experience forces on us with as much uncomplaining dignity as strength will allow. Beyond that, all we can ask of ourselves is that bitterness not cancel out our capacity to still be surprised." End quote. What I take Lopate to be saying is that the hardships of life add up. We exchange the nimble adventure of youth for the hardening shell of aged wisdom. Now, Thomas Cole was a 19th century painter, and in one of his most famous works, he captures the process of aging. This series of paintings is called The Voyage of Life, and it is a series of 4 paintings depicting in highly metaphoric terms one man's growth and decline. The paintings have a storied history. The first version was bought by a collector and stashed in a private museum. Cole thought that the paintings deserved a wider audience, and so he created a second version. That one was eventually put in a hospital where it was largely neglected and uncared for. It would take many decades for someone to discover it and rehabilitate it and give it an audience. Now, in the first painting in the series, we see a boat with a small child in it, and I'll be showing these images while I preach. So we see a boat with a small child in it, and the scene is verdant and joyful. The boat is full of lush flora. Each small thing seems to offer itself to the child. The baby is transfixed by simple, carefree joys. On the front of the boat is a full hourglass, and only beauty and goodness stretch before this child. In the second image, we see an adolescent on the verge of adulthood. He is sailing towards a castle in the sky. The boy takes charge of the tiller as he comes to direct his own life. The young man exchanges the simple, present joys of childhood for future pursuits, represented by the magisterial castle in the clouds. And then there is the third image. Here we see a middle-aged man fervently praying as the waves become treacherous. He is tossed by the worries and hardships of life. A gnarled and desolate landscape sprawls before him. Life's shine has worn off. Further, this stage is marked by disappointment. We see a path wandering off to the man's side, a path that will not be taken. The sand in the hourglass continues to diminish, and it seems that there is only more disappointment to come. This third painting gives visual life to Lopate's sentiments against joy. Human beings here exchange zest and adventure for the bitterness of experience. The bruises, hardships, and disappointments eventually add up. Perhaps the youth never made it to the castle in the sky. Perhaps he did make it to the castle in the sky, and now he spends his days comparing his castle with other castles. Or perhaps his arrival was fleeting, and the euphoria and rapture of his early accomplishment has made all else appear desolate. Now, it's true that each person has a different life itinerary. Many people would not identify with a carefree childhood. Adolescence is not necessarily a time of abundant hope. Indeed, circumstances relating to race and class and gender may change this picture dramatically. That being said, many people do report less satisfaction in their middle years. Jonathan Ruach explains why this is so in his book, The Happiness Curve. He writes that often people have experienced enough disappointment to realize that not everything will be possible for them. And so they become less optimistic about their future. Simultaneously, they may have achieved enough, say a family and career, to have no clear sense of why they feel adrift. It thus becomes a time when many potentials and options are closed off, and yet what has been achieved feels unsatisfactory. Unhappiness sends its dark tendrils underground. Such unhappiness has a way of coloring life. Lopate's essay against joy provides a cornucopia of examples. He details the ways that the smallest pleasures can spoil. The pleasures of conversation over fancy appetizers transmutes into insufferable small talk. The pleasure of margaritas next to pool parties is a veneer for depression. The pleasure of sex can collapse into anxiety and boredom. Lopate is a killjoy, but I will admit that I find him to be an endearing and entertaining killjoy. I don't even like waterbeds, he moans. The thing is, for Lopate, life is a collection of disappointments that results in increasing bitterness. The journey leads to subjective states that are ever more desolate and rocky. But it is interesting to note that this is not where Thomas Cole's paintings end. The difficulty of the middle years is not the final scene. Rather, in the final painting, we see the choppy and treacherous waters open onto tranquil ones. Disappointment gives way to a calm wisdom. Quiet beauty is appreciated in place of extravagant visions. The tiller is broken off, and so is the hourglass. There is no determined direction to go in and no timing to observe. Rather, there is an invitation to enjoy the ride and the view. In a way, the older individual returns to his origin, is invited back to simplicity and joy. This matches the journey that Ruach charts in The Happiness Curve. The author says that many individuals do not end life on a bitter note. Instead, many find increasing connection, meaning, and pleasure in their later years. The subtitle of his book is Why Life Gets Better After 50. So what changes? And wherever we are in life, how do we turn the phases of hardship and challenge into an age of joy? Ruach explores this question through a story. He writes of one woman who was an activist in her early 20s. After decades of social activism, she burned out, despairing that any kind of change was possible in our broken world. She turned away from any kind of engagement. And it is easy to see how, out of frustration, she might have penned an essay much like Lopate's, maybe something along the lines of against helping others. But she didn't do that. Rather, eventually, she became interested in birds. She found a quiet peace in her interaction with them. She began to wonder if there was something that she could do to help them. She volunteered with the rehabilitation of California condors. And while she is less likely to believe these days that she can save the world, she has found joy in improving the lives of these particular creatures. Her joy passes in and out of amazement at the passing beauty of these extravagant creatures and the privilege of being able to share her days with them. I highlight this last part because I believe joy is not a shallow or Pollyanna sentiment. It does not ignore the impermanence of life and pretend that all is jolly. It can emerge through our relationship with those things in life which do not last. The poet David White says this about joy: joy is a measure of our relationship with death and our living with death. Joy is the raw engagement with the passing seasonality of existence. This is a deep kind of joy, a joy that arises when we grasp the particular beauty of this brief time that we have. It is also a joy that emerges from the ways that, reckoning with the seasonality of our existence, we sustain and care for others. We reach out and care for others and find joy in doing so because of the beauty and the brevity of life. Some of the wisest people offer this advice for moving from times of hardship into ages of joy. They tell us to cultivate connection and appreciation. In other words, finding meaningful, concrete connections that we can participate in and others that we can serve is a core part of finding meaning and joy. And developing a daily spiritual practice that helps us attend to the present, witnessing the beauty and the preciousness of what we have in our lives. These are concrete ways to enter into joy. With these tools, we just may find ourselves drifting from internal turbulence to calmer and more beautiful waters. This leads me back to that last painting in the Thomas Cole series. And I want to close by offering something of a critique of that last painting. While the quiet peace that pervades the man's later years is evident, something seems to me to be missing. The boat looks awfully lonely. There are no other people. There is nothing to serve or to do. There is no connection. It therefore misses one of the most vital ways that disappointment and pain can be transformed. When we are able to create loving connections with others and find new ways to serve in this brief time that we share here, then, like a morning glory at dawn, the secret of joy just may give itself up. My spiritual companions, on this new morning, may the secret of joy give itself up to you in all of its beauty, in all of our connections, in all of the ways that we attend to this moment. Amen. May it be so. Blessed be.
Dancing joy, gay laughing joy, bright-eyed joy, and I found her driving the butcher's cart in the arms of the butcher boy. Such company, such such company as keeps this young nymph joy. Such company as keeps this young nymph joy. To look for joy, slim dancing joy, gay laughing joy, bright-eyed joy, and I found her driving the butcher's cart in the arms of the butcher boy. Such company as keeps this young nymph joy. Such company as keeps this young nymph joy.
We will have coffee hour in 5 minutes, so I invite you to refill your cup, get the link from the newsletter, and then join us. But first, by way of closing, I offer some words from the novelist Jack London. May you be mastered by the sheer surging of life, the tidal wave of being, the perfect joy of each separate muscle, joint, sinew, that is everything that is not death, that is aglow and rampant, expressing itself in movement, flying exultantly under the stars. May you find such joy today. Blessed be.